Dear students, welcome to this module on selection of the type of ownership for food service organizations. The choice of a proper form of organization is crucial for the success of any business enterprise and especially the service industry such as ours, the food service organizations. At the outset, the type of ownership in which the food service organization is to be run, the choice of the form of business organization determines the risk, responsibilities and control of the food service operator as well the division of the profits. It is a long-term decision because the form of organization selected cannot be changed frequently. The right form of organization can help the enterprise through the initial success but in later growth too. Therefore, the form of ownership organization should be selected after due care and thought. After going through this module on the selection of type of ownership, you will be able to understand the type of ownership suitable for the different food service operations and also compile the suitability, merits, demerits of each of the types of ownership for the various food service outlets. The various types of ownership suitable for the food service operations are also similar to other organizations. Before discussing the choice of the form of ownership, it is necessary to discuss the various forms of organization and their merits along with the demerits. Every organization choice has its own merits and demerits. From this viewpoint of ownership, there are four main forms of the ownership which can be number 1 sole proprietorship, number 2 partnership, number 3 joint stock companies and number 4 cooperative enterprises. The sole proprietorship, as the name indicates, is the individual proprietorship and is the simplest and the oldest form of ownership in the organization structure. It is a business owned and controlled by a single one person. The individual may borrow money or invest in his own investments and employ assistants for the various functions. But she or he alone is responsible for the result of the business. The individual who establishes is also known as a sole proprietor or an individual proprietor. He is also the sole trader of the business. Let us see now the salient features of this form of organization. It says single ownership is the best the characteristic of this form of ownership. One man controls all decisions and management functions of the organization, and there exists no separate legal entity of the firm. And unlimited liability is the characteristic feature of this form of organization, where it says the liability is to forego even the personal assets in case of losses, if any. And also at the same time, the trader is responsible to enjoy all profits if the organization goes on a profit. And the last one is the undivided risk. The risk is the sole owner of the undivided risk is also a salient feature of a sole proprietorship firm, where risk is too much and he has to bear all risk when he starts some enterprise as a sole proprietor. Now let us see what are the merits of having a sole proprietorship firm. It is easy to form. It has direct motivation to the employees. Employees feel very much motivated. Independent control of the employer, the owner and also the employees. Quick decisions. Any decisions can be taken by one man because it is easy to take both the complex and the simple decisions. Business secrecy, personal touch with the customer and the employees, freedom from government regulations, flexibility of operations and social utility are all the merits of having such forms of organization. A single man can do anything. And now we will see the demerits of this sole proprietorship firms. So it says limited funds. The capital investment is limited because one man has to take care of all the financial requirements. Lack of specialization and monotony becomes the firm feature of this sole proprietor because he doesn't have anyone to share his ideas and decisions for other decision making problems. The unlimited liability, uncertainty in life, and limited scope for expansion are also the other demerits which are suitable for the small hotels in countries like ours. So far we have seen the merits, suitability and demerits of the sole proprietorship firm. Now we will move on to the next form of ownership firm, which is the partnership firms. As a food service enterprise expands beyond the capacity of a single person, a group of persons have to join together and supply the necessary capitals and skills. The partnership firm thus grew out of the limitations of one-man business, needed to arrange more capital, provide better skills for employees, and also avail the specialization levels to the growth of partnership form of organization. Now, we will see what are the characteristics suitable for the partnership firm. 2 or more persons, it is says maximum 10 persons if it is in case of banking businesses and 20 in case if the business is a non-banking one. Agreement is either written or oral and it is a lawful business registered under Indian Partnership Act. Sharing of properties is also written in the agreement. Mutual agency among the partners, no separate legal entity of the firm, unlimited liability, restriction on transfer of interest, utmost good faith exists because the number of partners are many here unless in the case of the sole proprietor. Now we will see what are the merits, advantages of having a partnership firm. Ease of formation. A partnership firm is easy to form as no cumbersome legal formalities are involved. An agreement is necessary and the procedure for registration is very simple under Indian Partnership Act. The next merit is large financial resources can be accumulated as number of persons, the partners, contribute to the capital of the firm. It is possible to collect large financial resources than is possible in the sole proprietorship firms. And then the specialization and balanced approach is much easier when we compare with the sole proprietorship. The partnership firm enables the pooling of abilities and judgment of several persons and also combine the abilities and judgments in a more efficient management for the business firm. And also the flexibility of operations are possible, though not as versatile as proprietorship. A partnership firm enjoys the sufficient flexibility in its day-to-day operations. The nature and the place of business can be changed whenever the partners desire. And also the protection of the minority interest is also taken in such cases of firm. No basic changes in the rights and obligations of the partners can be made without the unanimous consideration of all the other partners in the firm. Others, the personal incentives and supervisions is possible. There is no diverse between the ownership and the management. Partners share their profits and losses of the firm and there is equal motivation to improve the efficiency of the business. The capacity for survival is also better in such firms. The survival capacity of the partnership firms is higher than that of a sole proprietorship firm. The partnership firm can continue even after the death or the insolvency of a partner if the remaining partners desire to do so. Better human and public relations is seen in these partnership firms. Due to number of representatives, that is the partners of the firm, it is possible to develop personal touch with the employees, customers, government and also the general public. Now about the business secrecy, if we talk, it is not compulsory for partnership firms to publish or file its accounts and reports. Important secrets of business remain confidential to the partners and are unknown even to the outside world. So these all become the merits of having a partnership form of organization. Now let us move on to see the demerits of these firms. Unlimited liability. Every partner is jointly and severely liable for their entire debts of the firm. He has to suffer not only for his own mistakes but also for the lapses and dishonesty of the other partners. Limited resources. Limited resources is also a demerit. The amount of financial resources in partnership is limited to the contributions made by all the partners. The next demerit is the risk of implied agency. The act of a partner are binding on the firm as well as on the other partnerships. And also we will be seeing lack of harmony which may dishonor the partnership forms. The success of partnership depends upon the mutual understanding and cooperation among the partners. Lack of continuity is also a demerit seen in the partnership firms. The partnership comes to an end with the retirement, incapacity, insolvency and death of a partner. Also, we see that non-transferability of interest occurs. No partner can transfer his share in the firm to an outsider without the unanimous consent of all the other partners. Public distrust. A partnership firm lacks the confidence of public because it is not subject to detailed rules and regulations. The lack of publicity of its affairs undermines public confidence in the firm. So these all becomes the demerits of the partnership form of organization. Now let us move on to see the next little complex form of organization, which is the joint stock companies. A joint stock company is an incorporated and voluntary association of individuals with a distinctive name, perpetual successions, limited liability with a common seal, and usually having a joint capital divided into transferable shares of a fixed value. So, these salient features of the company form of organizations are separate legal entity. A company has an existence entirely distinct from and independent of its members. It can own property and enter into contacts in its own name. It can sue and be sued on in its own name. Number 2 is the artificial legal person. A company is an artificial person created by law and exists only in contemplation of law. It is intangible, having no body and no soul, with a common seal. Next salient feature of a joint stock company is perpetual existence and succession. A company enjoys continuous and uninterrupted existence, and its life is not affected by a death, insolvency, lunacy, etc. of its members and directors, because there are many members into the group. And the next salient feature is, when compared to the other forms of organization, it has limited liability. A liability of the members of the limited company is limited to the value of the shares subscribed to or to the amount of guarantee given by them, and do not have to sacrifice the personal assets. And also the other important feature is having a common seal. A company, being an artificial person, cannot sign for itself. Therefore, the law provides for the use of common seal as substitute for its signature. Transferability of shares is also another salient feature seen in this form of ownership. The shares of a public limited company are freely transferable. They can purchase and sell through the stock exchanges, and every member is free to transfer the shares to anyone without the consent of the other members. Also, we could see there is separation of ownership and management. The number of members in a public company is generally very large, and that all of them are most and cannot take active part in the day-to-day activities of the managements of the company. Incorporated association of the persons. A company is an incorporated or registered association of many persons. One person cannot constitute a company. Under the law, it says in a public limited company at least 7 persons, and in a private limited company at least 2 persons are required to register as a company. Now let us see the differences between a private and public limited companies. Private company is a company which is governed by the Articles of Association and restricts the rights of its members to transfer the shares, if any, and also limits the number of members to 50 and excludes members who were in the employment of the company and prohibits any invitation to the public subscribers for any shares in or the debentures of the company. But whereas a public company means a company which is not private, but it is a company in which lays down no restrictions on the transfer of its shares. And also it does not limit the maximum number of its members and can invite public for subscribing it into its shares and debentures. So this is the difference between a private and the public limited companies. Now we'll see what are the advantages of possessing this company form of organization. The company form of organization has become very popular in modern businesses and especially also in hotels and account for several advantages. Number one, it has limited liability. The shareholders of the company are liable only to the extent of the face value of the shares held by them and nothing beyond that. Number two, the large financial resources accumulated. The company form of ownership enables the collection of huge financial resources. Number three, the continuity. A company enjoys the uninterrupted business lives as compared to the earlier forms of organization where we cannot rely on the existence of the company form of organizations. Number four, the transferability of shares. A member of a public limited company can freely transfer his shares without the consent from any of its members. And professional management is also one of the salient feature. Due to its large financial resource accumulation and continuity of existence, a company can avail the services of expert professional managers. Also, we could see the scope for growth and expansion. There is considerable scope for expansion of business if a company is started in the joint stock basis. And public confidence. A public company enjoys confidence of public because its activities are regulated by the government under the Companies Act. Also, we see that the risk is diffused, the diffused risk. The risk is lesser in case of company is spread over a large number of members. And also we could see that there exist social benefits. The company organization helps to mobilize savings of the community and inverts them into the industry. So these all become the merits of the company form of organization. Now on the other hand, let us see what are the demerits of possessing company form of organization. A company suffers from the following limitations. Difficulty of formation. It is quite difficult to form as and when we compare with the earlier forms of organization where we saw it is easier to form. Excessive government regulations and control. A company is subject to elaborate statutory regulations in its day-to-day operations. Also, we see lack of motivation and personal touch. There is a diverse between ownership and management in large public companies. And also we see that there is a oligarchic management. In this, the theory of management of company is supposed to be democratic, but in actual practice, company becomes an oligarchic one. Also, we see an important demerit that affects everyone is the delay in decision making. Too many levels of management in a company result in a red tape and a red bureaucracy. The conflict of interest occurs and especially in the company form of ownership where in a permanent conflict of interest may exist. There are possibilities of fraudulent practices in promotions and other activities that is taking place in the company. There is possibilities and unscrupulous promoters may float a company to dupe innocent and ignorant investors. Also, the lack of secrecy is also a major demerit. Under the Company Act, a company is required to disclose and publish a variety of information on its working. Also, there are possibilities of social evils. The giant companies may give rise monopolies, concentration of economic power in a few hands, interference in the political system, lack of industrial peace, etc. So these are all the salient features, merits, demerits of these forms of organization. Choice of form of organization, as explained now, the business enterprise can be organized into several forms, and every form of organization has its own merits and demerits. A businessman, and especially a person who desires to start a food service, has to keep in view these merits and demerits while selecting an appropriate form of organization. The choice has to be made both at the time of setting up a new enterprise and also at the time of expansion and growth of an existing concern. At the time of launching a new business enterprise, the choice of form of ownership is dictated by several factors and are the nature of businesses include the service industries, the trade industries and the manufacturing industries. And also it is limited to the scale of operations, that is the volume of business that it wishes to extend in future and the size of the market area. Also, the degree of direct control desired by the owner. The amount of capital required initially as capital investment and also for later expansion as working capital. The degree of risk and liability and the willingness of the owners to assume personal liability for debts of the business is also to be considered. The division of profits among the owners and the length of life of the company as desired by the business, relative freedom from government regulations, scope and plan for internal organizations, comparative tax liabilities also decide one who has to desire for the choice of ownership. The impact of each one of these factors on the choice of a suitable form of ownership is as described now. Number one is the nature of food service. The nature of the food service has an important bearing on the choice of the form of ownership. The business enterprise provides direct services, for example, the small retailers, salons, tailors, restaurants, and professional services such as by doctors, lawyers depend for such forms of organization where personal attention to the customers and personal knowledge or skill of the owner is called for. These business activities require pooling of skills and funds, and the wholesale trade, accounting firms, tax consultants, stockbrokers are better organized as in the form of partnerships. Manufacturing organizations of large size and more commonly set up as private and public limited companies. The size and area of the operation also determines the form of ownership. The larger the scale of enterprises, the catering to national and international markets can be organized more successfully as private and public limited companies. On the other hand, the small and the medium firms are generally set up as partnership or proprietorship form of business. Degree of control desired also plays a role. A person who desires direct control of business prefers proprietorship rather than the other forms of ownership, especially the company form of ownership, because there exists the separation of ownership and management in the company form of ownership. And the amount of capital required determines the form of ownership. The funds required for establishment and operations of a business have an important impact on the chance of the enterprises. The enterprises requiring heavy investment may go for company form of organizations, and those requiring lesser capital may prefer sole proprietorship or partnership. And the degree of risk and liability is also an important factor that we have to keep in mind. The volume of risk and the willingness of owners to bear it is an important consideration. A single individual may have larger financial resources sufficient for the medium scale enterprises, but due to unlimited personal liability, he may not like to organize as a proprietor or a partnership. And also the division of the surplus. As sole trader receives all the profits of his business, he also bears all the risks. If a person is ready to bear the unlimited personal liability and desires the maximum share of profits, partnership and proprietorship or the preferable company form of organization when the desire is such. and the duration of the business also plays a prominent role. Temporarily, an ad hoc ventures can be organized as proprietorships and partnerships as they are easy to form and dissolve, but they lack continuity and stability. A business requiring a long period for establishment and constitution organized as a corporate body. The government regulations and control. Proprietorship and partnership firms are subject to little regulations and controlled by the government. And the managerial requirements say that the organizational and administrative requirements depend upon the size and the nature of the business. Small businesses using simple process of protection and distribution can be managed effectively as proprietorship and partnership firms. Due to this identity of ownership and management, motivation is very high in proprietorship and partnership type of firms. Flexibility of operation. The flexibility of operation is linked with the internal organizational of the business. The internal organization of sole proprietorship and partnership is much more simple and is less elaborate than the internal organization of a joint stock company. And the tax burden is also one important thing that we should consider. The various forms of ownerships are taxed differently under the Income Tax Act of India. If the expected volume of the profit is very high, it may be profitable to start as a company form of ownership. A company is taxed at a uniform rate, that is, the rate of tax remains the same irrespective of the volume of the profits, varied in case of partnership and proprietorship firms. The rate of tax increases with the volume of taxable income. A comparative statement on the different forms of ownership on the basis of the above factors is given. The suitability of the different forms may be classified as proprietorship, partnership, or the joint stock companies. Now we will see what all happens in the proprietorship. The small trading and service enterprises, especially like the food retailers, retail stores, workshops, bakeries, restaurants, tailoring shops, laundry shops, dry cleaners, all prefer to have the proprietorship form, sole proprietorship form of organization. And now when we look into the partnership or the private companies, the medium-sized service and trading concerns like the wholesalers, hotels, transporters, hire purchase firms, the confectionaries, professionals like lawyers, consultants also may prefer to choose these types of ownership firms. And the large-scale manufacturers and the large-scale food producers, the commercial undertakings like chain stores, departmental stores that require heavy investments, specializations preferred for such company forms of organization. So far we have seen the different forms of organization suitable for food service operations. So far we have seen the different forms of organization suitable for food service operations. Now, as a conclude to this module, the selection of the form of ownership for food service therefore depends on many criteria as so far discussed and has to be done with utmost care so that the forms of ownership is desired for administration and further management of the enterprise. As this is a long focused decision of the enterprise, the type of ownership decides everything further. Deciding the choice of ownership, its demerits, its merits, salient features of each form, the owner should be able to decide, focusing the short and the long-term plans of the food service organization. Hope you learnt in this module. Thank you.